Let's talk a little bit about the basic emotions that your character can take. Now, when you animate a character, you're posing the face to convey specific moods and emotion. Now, these facial poses will give the audience some information on your character's emotional state, and it can move the story forward. So, specific face poses can create specific emotions. So let's go ahead and look at some of the basic or classic facial poses, and we'll start off with the really broad emotions. So we're going to start off with probably the nicest emotion, and that's happy. So we can start off with just a very simple smile. So in this case, the corners of the character's mouth are lifted. Now we can push this pose a little bit further, and let's do that by getting the eyes and the eyebrows involved, as well as opening the mouth. Now in this pose, we've got a little bit more going on with the brows. We've got the brows kind of a nice relaxed brow. One of the things with a smile is that the cheek will push into the underside of the eye, so we can have a little bit of a line here that goes up into the eye, and that will show that the cheek has volume. We can also open the mouth a little bit and create a more of a toothy type of smile. Now, if we want, we can also get the body involved with an emotion. So if we do something just as simple as tilting the character's head back a little bit, that will show that he's a little bit more relaxed. Now let's move on to another emotion here, and this is the opposite of happy, so this will be sad. So as with happy, the position of the mouth is the main indicator of this emotion. So in this case, we've got the corners of the mouth pulled down, and so he's sad. But as with any emotion, we can push this a little bit further, and we can get the eyebrows and the eyes involved. So one of the things we're doing here is we're giving a little bit more of a weariness to the eyebrows, so we're making the eyebrows a little bit straighter, a little bit more up in the corners. We're actually narrowing the eyes just a little bit here. And then, of course, we can also pull the corners of the mouth down just a little bit more, show a little bit of teeth. And again, that will accentuate that feeling of sadness. Now we can also get the body involved. In this case, we can drop the chin, divert the gaze. So when a character is sad, his chin will be down, he will be in a down position. He won't want to look people in the eye, so he'll divert his gaze. So when we add that to the pose, again, it conveys more information. Now with all of these poses, we're just trying to communicate information about the character. Now let's go back to neutral, and let's go to a more extreme emotion, and that is anger. Now anger is a violent emotion. It's where you kind of are in attack mode. So we have a lot of things happening in the face. We have the teeth bared here, and what that does is it kind of gives more like fangs bared. He's ready to attack. We've got the brows down in the classic angry brows, so dropping the brows like this almost always conveys anger. And then the eyes are fairly open, but again, I pulled up this line here just to give him a little bit more in that pose. So let's go ahead and move on to the next emotion. And this one's a little bit more shocking. It's surprise. Now, surprise is a very open emotion. You're basically trying to gather as much information as possible. So in surprise, typically you're going to have something where the eyes are wide open here. And again, the brows are almost at maximum, so we've got a very high brow. And, you know, a lot of times the mouth will be agape. Now, we're not showing teeth here because this is not a threatening emotion. This is more shock, surprise, that sort of thing. Now, if we start to shut surprise down a little bit, let's go ahead and close the mouth. And you see that we have the beginnings of another emotion. And if we go a little bit further, you'll see that we have what's called disgust. Now, disgust is the emotion where you don't want sensory input. You want to kind of shut down your senses. So in disgust, we have kind of the mouth pulled up and closed right here, so it's kind of not accepting information. You're kind of pinching the nose right here, and again, we're bringing in the brows, narrowing the eyes. We're trying to shut down the senses a little bit, so that way the character is not bringing in information, because if you're disgusted, you don't want to smell, you don't want to see things. So again, you're shutting down your sensory input. Now finally, another emotion here is fear. Now this one looks a little bit like shock, but if we put it a little bit further, you can see that we've got more of a fearful expression. Now fear is a highly alert sort of emotion, so we're going to have the eyes fairly open here. And typically we'll pull down the corrugators, which are the muscles that give this sort of emotion. So we kind of want that line there for the mouth. The brows themselves are going to be kind of pulled in a little bit, but up, and this will give a nice fearful expression. Now all of these expressions are fairly broad. You can add a lot more subtlety and variations to your expressions, but if you understand some of the basic broad emotions, you can dial in your character's emotional state from those. Once we understand the basic emotions, we can start mixing and matching emotions to get more complex moods and emotions. So let's take a look at this. We're going to start with just mixing upper and lower face. So I'm going to start off with a neutral position, and let's go to a happy pose. In fact, let's go a little bit further. Let's go to a happier pose. So in this happy pose, we've got the mouth pulled up into the cheek, and we've got some relaxed brows. Now if we change this just a little bit and change the brows, now we have something completely different. We have an evil grin. And that's because the top half of the face is completely different than the bottom. So we've got in the top half of the face, we've pushed the brows down, we have angry brows up on top, but we've got a smiling face on the bottom. And so this mix of emotions gives us a very different mood. So we can just go from happy to evil just by flipping the eyebrows around. Now if we want, we could even push this basic emotion a little bit further. We can narrow the eyes and get the eyes involved in the anger, but still maintain the happy face. And again, this face here is much different than this face. And it's really just because we're working with the upper portion of the face. So if you think of any of these that I'm going to show you, that basically what we're doing is we're just mixing and matching along a line here. So up here we have angry, and down here we have happy. And the mixture of those two gives you a completely different message. So let's go back to a neutral pose, and let's dial in something a little bit different. So let's go to a sad face, and we have a classic sad face with sad brows. But if we change the brows, and again, if we change just the upper portion of the face, we get a much different emotion. So in this case, we're displaying an emotion somewhat like rage, so the character is starting to get angry. And again, the only change here was the eyes. So here we have sad eyes, and here we have kind of a surprised, angry brow, so we've got a little bit of rage going on here. Let's go to another emotion here. This is a classic fear emotion. We've got the corners of the mouth pulled down and the brows up. And again, if we change this, we've changed just the mouth to happy, and now we've got something that's probably a little bit more worried. So we've got kind of a worried happiness, maybe worried but glad, something like that. Let's start with another emotion. Let's start with surprise. So again, surprise is a very open emotion. We've got the mouth open, we've got the brows up, we've got the eyes wide. If we change the lower portion of the face and just make it sad, then you get something that's a little bit more like shock or disbelief. And again, we're just mixing and matching emotions along this horizontal line here. So we're just mixing upper and lower. So up here on the top we have surprise, down here we have sad. So those two together make for a little bit different emotion. And we can just change that lower portion of the face a little bit and have a smile with a surprised look, and we get something that maybe is a little bit more hopeful. So as you can see, you can mix and match the basic emotions to get more complex emotions. Now we mix these along the top and bottom axis, but you can also mix them asymmetrically. Another way to add more life to your characters is to create asymmetrical poses. So here we have a very simple happy pose. Now this pose, however, is very symmetrical. So if I were to, say, draw a line down the center of the face here, you'll see that the left and right sides of that face are pretty much identical. Now we can push an emotion to one side of the face or another to give a little bit more character to the pose. Now if I drop the smile on one side and leave it on the other, you'll have a little bit more character in that smile, a little bit more visual interest. Now this also avoids what are called twins, which are symmetry in your character. Now if we want, we can push this and create a very asymmetrical pose. Now this is kind of more of a goofy smile, but again, it's not a symmetrical pose, so it's a little bit more visually interesting. So let's go back to neutral and let's dial in another pose. In this case, we're going to do anger. Now again, we're looking at this pose and you'll see that it's very symmetrical. So if you draw a line straight down the face, you'll see that both sides are pretty much the same. But again, we can push this right or left. So if we change it on one side or the other, you'll get a completely different emotion. And again, you'll get more visual interest. Now we can also get the character's body involved. So if we want, we can tilt the head a little bit, and that'll give even a little bit more asymmetry to the character and a little bit better pose. Now let's start off with a sad expression, and then let's again push that a little bit more. So by again pushing it to one side, you're giving a character that's a little bit more pensive. We've dropped the brow just a little bit here, and we've pulled the corner of the cheek over a lot. And that gives it, again, it pushes it to one side. If you notice, again, the eyes are a little bit more wide open on one side than the other. And again, all of this asymmetry adds a little bit more life to the pose. Now if we change this a little bit more, you can see just by changing a very subtle thing about the character. So let's just go ahead and change that brow. And we've gone from pensive to maybe something a little bit more thoughtful. And again, just a slight change in a character's expression can create a completely different mood. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that neutral is in itself an emotion. So if we have a character here with a neutral face, that can tell you something as well. And then if we add to that neutral face just a little bit, you can have a little bit more of an emotion. So if we raise the brow, for example, it could mean that he's had an idea or a thought. Or if you change both brows, you can see that, well, maybe he's starting to be angry. But again, neutral is also an emotion. So when you're posing a character, pay attention to asymmetry in that character. If you push an emotion to one side of the face or another, it can give a whole new dynamic to the character's mood and emotion. Let's take a look at the eyes and how they affect character emotion. Now the eyes are critical to your animation because the eyes communicate a lot of information to the audience. We're naturally drawn to the eyes and we're always looking at them. So we need to pay special attention to our character's eye direction as well as the eye shape. Let's start off with eye direction, and we're going to start off with a happy pose. Now in this case, the character's eyes are facing forward, so she's happy at whatever she's seeing. If we change the direction of the eyes, now she's looking up and away. And this kind of looks a little bit more like she's distracted. She's thinking of something from her past or maybe anticipating something that's going to happen. But basically, she's in her thoughts. Now, one thing you need to pay special attention to with eyes is how the iris connects to the outside edge of the eye. Now, by this, I mean this little area here. Now, in this particular case, the iris is connected to the outside edge of the eye. And this gives us the impression that she's kind of more in her thoughts. Now if we change this a little bit and move that iris away from the edge of the eye, it looks more like she's observing something in the scene. So this little bit of white here changes slightly the intention of the scene. So you need to pay special attention to that. So again, let's go ahead and move her eyes back a little bit more, and you can see how it changes the way that you see this particular scene. Now if we change her glance from up and away to down, again, it changes the feel or the mood of the scene. Now let's go to another emotion. We'll make her sad. Now she's looking straight at the camera, so whatever she's sad about is what's in front of her. And again, we can make her look away. So I'm going to go ahead and make her look down. Now when she's looking down like this, we're getting a different vibe. Now I'm sensing that she's maybe a little bit worried, a little bit fearful, maybe a little bit anxious. And again, that's because the eyes are looking down. Now down is associated with sadness, looking away, avoiding eye contact. Now if we change her eyes to up, again we're getting a different mood. So in this case, she's kind of rolling her eyes. She's saying whatever. So all we've really done is just change the position of the iris within the eye, and we're changing the mood of the character. So eye position has a very important effect on how the character communicates to the audience. So let's go to something else. I'm going to go to a neutral pose here, and let's look a little bit at eye shape. So the shape of the eye, the outline of the eye, has an effect on mood as well. So in this case, we've got a neutral pose here, and we have the eyes pretty much wide open here. So this gives you a different mood than if we were to change the shape. So let's do something a little drastic here, and let's do an extreme happy. So in this case, I've actually changed the shape of the eyes. They were almond shaped, and now we've kind of made them a little bit different. We've kind of created an underside arc here, and this gives us a sense that the cheek is really puffed out and that she's super, super happy. And really, what's really driving this particular pose or facial expression is the eye and the way that that cheek cuts into the lower part of the eye. Now if we do something a little bit different, maybe we relax those eyes a little bit and we make her look away, again we're getting a different expression. So in this case, we're getting the eyes really wide open here, so we've got a nice arc here. But again, we've got the lids mostly closed here. And so this is giving us a little bit different expression. Now if we drop the top lid, again, it's changing the emotion. Now here, maybe she's surprised and happy about what she sees. Here, she's a little bit more devious. You know, she's a little bit more sly, and that's because we've closed the eye. And again, the shape of this eye plays a huge role in how we perceive this character's face. So by closing down those lids, narrowing the eyes, we change the emotion that the character is communicating. If we take this same emotion, add a little bit of sadness to it, again, we're changing this. And if we want, we can even drop the eyelids further. So if we drop the eyelids, so now it's open here on the bottom. Again, we're looking at white space here, and we're getting a little bit of white space here. But the most important thing is that we're getting almost a straight line right there. And that changes the mood, again, to one of disapproval. So she's not very happy at this point. Now, if we really narrow the eyes, you're seeing that we're going from disapproval to really kind of upset. So the eyes are very important to your character. The direction of your eyes will communicate a lot, as well as the shape of your eyes. So pay extra attention to your character's eyes when creating facial poses. Now let's animate a scene that has a change in facial expression. For this exercise, we're going to do a simple double take. Now this is a classic reaction shot that you'll see in a lot of cartoons. And what happens is the character observes something, he turns away from that thing, and then reacts and then turns back and looks at the thing again. So that's where we get the double take. Now, how you animate the double take is really going to be up to you. But one of the things I would suggest is that you think about how you want your character to move and react and sketch it out a little bit. So I've got a sketch that I did for this particular character, and this is kind of how I want this to go. And this is a pretty much a standard type of double take. So we're going to start off here with the character just kind of passing time, really a very neutral expression. And then he's going to turn his head and observe something, turn back with that same expression, kind of a neutral expression, like almost like as if nothing happened. And then here's where the fun part comes. We're going to have him slowly react. Okay, so this happens fairly slowly, and then he's going to anticipate and then do another head turn with a much different expression. So once we understand what to do with our character, let's go ahead and start posing him, and we'll do that next. Now we have our basic shot planned out, and if you've thumbnailed it, you'll know the poses that your character needs to take. So the first step is to get the rough poses into the timeline, and then make sure that the timing of the character's motions is correct. Now we're going to be focusing mostly on the body on this first pass. Now even though this is a facial animation course, remember we have to animate the entire character. So the body motion of the character will also drive the face and the facial expressions. So let's get started with blocking in our rough pass. Now for my animation, these are the thumbnails that I have. So I'm going to try and get these 6 or so poses into the timeline so that way we can have some timing. Now the first thing we need to do is have an initial pose for the character. So in this case, I want him to be kind of casual, kind of looking up and away to his left. Now I don't want his head straight on like this, so I'm going to turn his head a little bit and just a little bit up. Now when the character is looking straight at the camera, it's a very strong pose, and you kind of want to save those for those moments where you need it. So generally try and keep your character off to one side or the other. So I'm going to start off with my pose here, and I want to make sure that I'm setting keys for this. I'm going to set a key for the body and for the head. Now this initial pose, I want to hold it for just a little bit so that the audience can recognize that the character is in this pose. If we start the head turn into the second pose immediately, we won't have a beat for the audience to get used to the scene. So I'm going to give this about a quarter of a second. So I'm going to go up to frame 6. And I just want to make sure that I set keys for this. So these keys here now just are a hold of the character. So the character's doing nothing at this point. And that's fine. And now we need to move into the next pose. And the next pose is the character looking to his right. So now the question is, how fast is he going to turn his head? Well, in this case, I want to start off slow, and then when he has that sudden realization, then I want to speed it up. So this, I want to kind of just be casual with this. So I'm going to give it about a half of a second. So right now I'm going to go from frame 6 to 18, and that'll be a half second. And let's go ahead and just turn the head. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the head a little bit. Give it a pretty good pose here. So that way he's looking off to the other side here. And again, set keys for the character's head and body. So now we've got just a real simple pose. Now I can do another in between here, because typically when a character rotates his head, he dips his head, he blinks his eyes and stuff. But I'm not so concerned about that right now. I just want to, again, get the broad timing. So now he needs time to observe what is happening. So again, I just want to give it a little bit of time. So in this case, I'm going to give it another 12 frames. So I'll give it about 6 seconds. And again, let's make sure that we set keys for that. So he is now turning his head, and again, holding. And again, I'm just going to use this kind of same timing. Now, a lot of times you'll see in animation that people are using kind of the same spacing between major poses. And in this case, I'm going to use another 12 frames, and I'm going to bring him back to looking the other way, or basically looking up and away. And I'm just going to move him here, and again, just set some keys. So now we've got him looking, holding, and then just looking back. So let's go ahead and play that at speed and see what we have. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So he looks, sees, and then looks back. Okay, that's pretty good. So now the question is, we need time for him to do a realization and then a reaction. So this is where we kind of maybe have to play with timing a little bit. And a lot of times this will depend upon how much time the director gives you or how much time you actually have in the shot. But since we have 4 seconds, I'm going to give him a slow burn. I really want him to kind of take his time to realize that there's something and then react fairly quickly. So I'm going to give this a full second. So I'm going to basically just hold this for about a second. So let's go ahead and set some keys here. And then I want to do a fairly quick reaction and then turn the head again. So the reaction, he's got to scrunch up. So I want to anticipate. So right about here, maybe about 4 frames. I want basically his head to come down. And I also want his shoulders to come up. So I'm going to go ahead and move those shoulders up. And let's go ahead and take that one, move it up. Make sure we get keys for these. So now he is basically reacting, and then he's going to look the opposite way. So again, he's going to go scrunch up and then turn. And so the turn, I'm going to give probably 6 to 8 frames or so for him to settle into that. So let's go ahead and start by turning the head right there. And then dropping the shoulders. So grab that shoulder there. There we go. Dropping the shoulders. And maybe even moving those arms out just a little bit. So he's definitely having a reaction. So now we've got something like this. So he looks, comes back, and then has that reaction. Now this is very, very simple blocking. Now because I'm blocking this so broadly, I only have a few keys on the timeline. And this means that if I don't like my timing, I can slide things forward or back, and I can readjust my timing very easily. And that's because I don't have a lot of keys for the face or any sort of a secondary motion or anything like that. I'm really just trying to get the rough blocking of the scene. So once I have this in place, I can then start to fill in the facial expressions as well as secondary motion and start to flesh out the scene. The basic timing of the scene in place. So let's just go ahead and play this to see where we're at. So we have the character in a neutral pose. He turns his head to look at something, turns back, slowly changes his expression, antics, and then reacts. So let's dial in the basic facial poses. Now these are pretty much going to follow the main poses of the head motion, and we'll just use this as a starting point. So the first thing I want to do is just get an initial expression on his face. So maybe I want to drop the eyelids a little bit here. Kind of relax his face a little bit. And maybe even kind of give him a nice relaxed brow. maybe one of the brows is up a little bit. And we can maybe pull them down in the corners just a little bit, just again to show that he's relaxed. And we can play with our emotion, maybe the position of his mouth. And again, we just want to get a nice general position. So I want to make sure I keep his mouth, his eyes, and his brows. So again, I want to try and keep this as a held pose. So again, I'm just going to make sure that I set a key for those. So now we've got a hold here right in the front. Now because it's just a few frames, we probably can just keep that held a little bit. If we wanted to, we could jostle the head maybe just a little bit just to give him a little bit of life. But generally, we kind of just want to keep him still because he will move very quickly towards the end there. So there we go. So now he's going to turn his head and we're going to have another facial expression. I'm not worried about the blinks at this point. Again, I just want to get the main facial expressions. So this is the point where we need to understand eye direction. Where exactly is he looking? So we need to either have this in mind for the scene or just something that looks good visually. So I'm having him look a little bit further to his right than his head is. And let's go ahead and just make sure that we've got that keyed in. And again, I want to try and keep most of his face fairly stable. And that's because we're going to change his expression later. So I want to kind of keep him in the same mood. So now he does this, and again, I want to hold this pose. And then we go back to something very similar. Now in this case, I don't want him looking up and away, but maybe he's kind of staring into space maybe a little bit, or just kind of thinking about what he just saw. Okay, so again, that's just something that's going to be a little bit more story driven. But again, I'm just at this point, I'm wanting to keep him fairly neutral for this first half of the shot, and then the big expression change. Okay, so now we've got, he looks, and then maybe we can tweak his eyebrows just a little bit here. And now we've got a big change in expression. So we have all the way up to here, right around frame 72, for him to change his expression. Now I'm going to actually have it a little bit faster than that. I'm going to change it up to about, say, frame 68. So about 4 frames before he starts his main reaction, I want that change of expression to be on his face. And again, I'm giving myself about 4 frames for the audience to read it. So let's go ahead and have some fun here and create a reaction. So let's go ahead and first off, is the reaction happy or sad? Well, let's go ahead and make it a little bit kind of shocking. So maybe we can play a little bit with the mouth. So now you see that the mouth is dropping. We could drop it maybe even a little bit more. Maybe widen it a little bit. And if we want, we can play with the mouse shift to bring it up or down. Now let's go ahead and also worry about the eyes. So now, as that changes, maybe the eyes start to open a little bit more wide. So there we go. So that's a much different change of expression. So again, you can see how this change of expression just kind of starts to happen. And then what else happens with the eyebrows? Well, we can certainly raise them. So I can certainly bring them up a little bit. Another thing I can do is bring them down. And so if I bring them down, it's going to show a little bit more concern. So let's go ahead and bring them down just a bit. So now we've got this. So let's go ahead and play that and see what we have. So now we have the motion of the character's body and the basic facial expressions in place. So now let's go ahead and start finessing this into adding some secondary motion and some blinks to further finalize the animation. But before we do, let's play what we have. So let's go ahead and start working with this. So at the beginning here, he has this head turn. Now head turns, as you probably know by now, are usually followed by a dip in the chin. So that chin doesn't just move from place to place. Typically the character's head drops as he does the head turn. So I'm going to start here, and we're going to create a center key here for the head. So now he looks, and that gives a much more fluid motion. Now, another thing that can happen in a head turn, it's not a strict rule, but we can add in a blink, and a lot of times that will cover the change in eye direction that we have. So let's go ahead and blink the eyes, and let's go ahead and set a key for those. So now we've got that, and that's a lot more fluid than what we had before. Now here we've got a pretty long hold. This is about 12 frames, so that's almost too long to hold it just in one place. So I'm going to go ahead and just tilt the head a little bit just to give it a moving hold. So I'm just changing that head key here. And so you can see that just by having a little bit of motion on there, it's got some life. So now we've got another head turn. So what are we going to do? We are going to dip the chin, just like we did before. So now, and it also, let's go ahead and add in a blink. So now we've got blink. Now one thing about head turns is that the eyes also can lead the head turn. So typically a character looks in the direction of the head turn. So I'm actually going to go a few frames in, about halfway into this first blink, and I'm just going to take the eyes and I'm going to put them a little bit towards the direction of his head turn. Again, make a key there. So now let's see that. So let's look at the very beginning of this. So you can see he's got a much more fluid motion here. So now we've got a really long space here. We've got this huge space here without too much going on except for the change in his facial expression. Now that is some animation, but his head is pretty still. So maybe what we should do is kind of give him a little bit of a head motion that happens with this. So I'm actually going to go to the very end of this, frame 72. And again, this is a moving hold. So he's having this realization, maybe he kind of cocks his head just a little bit when he has that realization. So maybe he turns his head a little bit to the side. So now you can see how this slow realization is kind of happening, and it gives just a little bit more life. And now we've got this character coming down. I'm going to take this body and actually scrunch him down just a little bit more, and then when he comes up here, I'll go ahead and bring him up to the normal position. So now he's doing that. So he's actually moving down and up. And we have the blink here, and this pose is actually pretty good. So we've got a pretty good final pose here. So let's see what we have. Now I've gone ahead and really just added in some blinks, smoothed out the head motion, and just added a few moving holds. And let's see what we have now. So I think that's pretty good. Like with any animation, we could continue to finesse this, but as you can see, we have a process in place. So what we want to do when we animate shots like this is to thumbnail out or understand how we want the character to be posed, put in the poses, get the timing correct, and then start working on the character's face, and then start doing overlap, follow through, secondary motion, and then we can do multiple passes of that to get the animation as smooth as we want. So now we've animated a change of expression. And I hope this process helps you with whatever character animation you do. Now let's go a little bit further and animate some dialogue. Now most dialogue has an emotional content, and if you want, you can use the dialogue that I'm providing in the download, or you can use your own dialogue. Now this line that I've chosen has just a little bit of an emotional arc. So let's go ahead and just play the dialogue and see what we have.
Oh, I don't know. Will there be pie?
So in this line of dialogue, we have two distinct emotions. At the very beginning of the line, she's a little bit disappointed, and then she turns to hopeful. So let's listen to it once more, and this time let's listen to the emotional content of the line.
Oh, I don't know. Will there be pie?
So at the very beginning here, we've got,
oh, I don't know.
So this part of the dialogue is more down. You know, she's kind of disappointed. So we have here, you can even see the lines here. We have, oh,
I don't know.
I don't know. And then the second part is, will there be pie? And she's very hopeful. So now we're kind of going into more of an up emotional state here. So what we want to do is basically pose our character to reflect that change in emotion. So at the beginning of this, when she says, oh, I want her basically to kind of sink down. So I want to get her body language so that she's moving downward. And here, in between this space, right about here, she's going to have a change of emotion. She's going to go from down to hopeful. So then at the end of that, she will say,
will there be pie?
So when you start to analyze a line of dialogue, one of the things you can do is play the line of dialogue and act it out yourself. Try and understand how the character will speak the line. And then if you want, you can thumbnail those poses for reference that you can input later. Now I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to get a sense for what I want in terms of the character's body poses, and then we'll come back and start doing our initial blocking pass for this line. I've read my dialogue track and I've listened to it a few times, and now I have a rough idea as to where I want my character to go. So now I need to start blocking out my shot. Now I'm going to block this out starting with the body and then moving on to the face. So at this point I really just want to get the body moving in sync with the dialogue, and then I can fill in the rest. So again, our dialogue is,
oh, I don't know. Will there be pie?
so we have basically two emotions here. We have a down emotion where she says, oh, I don't know. And then her mood changes when she says, will there be pie? So let's go ahead and start off with the initial pose. Now, as the dialogue starts, she's actually going to change emotion. She's going to go from probably a neutral expression to a down or sad expression when she says, oh, I don't know. So I need to get my initial pose first. So when the camera first hits this character, I want her to be a little bit neutral, and I want her to be paying attention to whomever is giving her that information that she's reacting to. So I'm going to turn her slightly off camera. Now some of this will depend on the staging of your scene, but typically you don't want your character staring directly into the camera. That's a very strong pose, and you need to reserve that for just select moments. So in this case, she's looking slightly over the cameraman's shoulder. So I'm going to start off by keying just her head and her body. So I'm going to go ahead and set a key for both her head and her body. And in this case, I'm animating her body starting at the shoulders. Now you may want to start with the hips, but I can cheat it just a little bit for this shot because it's only a head and shoulder shot. So once I have these two poses in place, then I want to hold them for just a brief second. Now remember, the camera has just cut to this shot. You need to give a little bit of breathing room so that the audience can get used to what's in the shot. So I'm going to go basically to the beginning of this line of dialogue, which is probably only a couple of frames. It's about 3 frames here. And again, I'm going to set some keys for her body and her head. Now this creates a stiff hold, in other words, a non-moving hold, but for 3 frames that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Now if you want, you can adjust the position of the character slightly to give it a moving hold, and that might give it just a hair more life. Now that we have this initial pose in place, let's start animating the character. So in this case, she's saying,
Oh.
and if you listen to that, it almost sounds like a balloon is deflating. So she's really kind of moving down and actually deflating herself. So I'm going to go towards the end of this line, and let's just drop her and kind of move her down in that direction. So I'm going to actually drop her body just a bit, and then rotate her head down. So she's kind of starting to look downward because she's not very happy. And let's make sure we have some keys here. So now she's going,
Oh.
and you can see that it's starting to sync with the dialogue. So now she's kind of going along here,
Oh.
and that seems to work. So let's move on to the next little bit of dialogue. We're going to go here, and in this case she says,
I don't know.
so when she says, I don't know, typically you want the character to shake her head or something like that. So I'm going to have her shake her head no, just a few times, just left and right once. So in order to do that, I need to hold this initial pose first. So I'm going to go a few frames before this, and I'm just going to create a bit of a moving hold. So I'm going to drop her chin just a little bit more, and maybe even drop her body just a little bit more, and make sure we set some keys here. And let's go through.
Oh.
And you can see that as she moves into that, it's almost like she's doing a slow out on that initial move. And now at this point, she's going to start shaking her head no. She's going to say, I don't know. Now a lot of times the body will anticipate the dialogue. So in this case, I want her chin to start moving just slightly before she actually speaks the line. So I'm going to go at the very beginning of this line here, somewhere around frame 32 or something. So I'm going to start by moving her head a little bit to her right. So this is where she says, I. Make sure we get some keys in there. Now it's,
I don't know.
so now she's saying, I don't know. And basically for this, I'm going to divide this pretty much in half. So here we've got basically 2 motions here, one here and one here, about equal length. So she's going to go left here and then back to center here. So let's go to the center of that little piece of dialogue here, and let's just go ahead and make her shake her head. So I'm going to go to her left. And again, she's still sad, so I want to make sure that her chin kind of stays down.
I don't know.
And then let's go ahead and center her. So now we have this.
Oh. I don't know.
So that pretty much works. So as you can see, we're just getting the body to move along with the dialogue and to sync up with it. So let's go ahead and pick this up in the next lesson and animate the second half of this piece of dialogue. Now I have the first part of the scene blocked out. So we've got the character's body moving to the dialogue. And this is what we have.
Oh. I don't know.
So now the next half of this piece of dialogue is a change of emotion, a change of expression. So in this case, she's saying,
Will there be pie?
so she's moving up. So at the beginning of this little piece of dialogue here, she kind of moves down. So basically she's moving down when she gets sad. So in this second half here, we're going to have her move up. So again, we're just working with the body, so a lot of this information is going to be communicated through the body motion and the body position. So let's go ahead and just work on this one more time. Now, when she has a change of expression, she also needs to have a new thought come into her head. So she's saying, oh, I don't know. And then she thinks, will there be pie? And then she says it. So she gets this kind of an idea in her head. So we need to communicate that somewhere along in this space between this little piece of dialogue where she says, I don't know, and will there be pie? So first thing I want to do is kind of just create a little bit of a moving hold right around here. So I'm just going to go a few frames after this to say, oh, somewhere around frame 58 or so. And then I'm just going to, again, create a moving hold. Now her head was moving left to right, so maybe just cushion that just a little bit. And set a key for that and the body. So now, and now at this point, she kind of has a realization, almost like in a double take, where she kind of thinks twice about that. And so I'm going to go a few frames before this line and just put that pose in. So she's going to basically have an idea. Maybe she cocks her head just a little bit here. So something like that. And set some keys there. So now she's like, has her idea. And now at this point, the body is going to start moving up to match that dialogue. And again, it will anticipate just a little bit. So I'm going to go up to here, and I'm just going to start moving the body up. So let's just work with the body right now. So she's doing... I'm going to move the body down. So I'm just working with the body. I want to get the rhythm of her shoulders to kind of bounce along with this dialogue here. And you notice there's two big words in this. It's like, will there be pie? So I want to make sure she gets that first and second motion with her body.
Will there be?
So B, and again I'm going to move this down just a little bit. Set a key.
Will there be?
And again, pi is going to come up. So again, I'm going to set that. And then she'll settle down just a little bit. So all I've done is set up a couple of keyframes here to get her body moving. So right here, she's going to go up, and then she's going to kind of settle down, and then she's going to go up again, and then settle down just once more. So let's just take a look at this.
Will there be pie?
So it kind of goes along with the rhythm of the scene. Now this is just kind of rough. I could probably tweak this a little bit, but you get the idea as to what I'm doing. I'm just going...
Will there be pie?
So now that we have this, we can get the head moving along with this. Now remember, the head is going to start experiencing some secondary motion, so we need to take that into account. So I'm going to go to this frame here. So she's kind of pushing her body up, so the head will drag just a little bit. And so I'm going to dip that chin just a little bit and keyframe that. So will there, and that's the really big word in this, so I want there to be open.
Will there be?
So as this drags down, her head will be kind of along with this. So now, as the body's moving down, the head is again going to drag behind. So as the body's moving down, the head's going to kind of tilt back just a little bit.
Will there be?
So as she's moving up for the word pie, the head's going to drop down just a little bit. And again, set a key for that. And then just come up. Again, this is rough, but let's just see how this plays.
Will there be pie?
So will there be pie? You can actually feel that rhythm in the character's head. So let's play this once more from the beginning.
Oh, I don't know. Will there be pie?
Seems like in that middle section right here, where she kind of has this idea, it feels like it's a little too quick for what it is. Let's play it once more.
Oh, I don't know. Will there be pie?
So I think I'm going to soften this just a little bit. I'm going to go to this keyframe here and just make it a little less strong. It seems like she's moving a little too much for the emotion that she's creating. And again, this is one of the great things about computer graphics, is that we can go back and redo things.
Will there be...
And that seems a little bit softer, a little more subtle. Let's see how this plays.
Oh, I don't know. Will there be pie?
And that feels good to me. Now, it feels good not as a final animation, but as a first blocking pass. We're going to do a couple more passes on this, but now that I have basically the rough position of the character's body and head, I can move on to actually animating the face. We've blocked in the rough motion of the character's body, and now it's time to add another layer of animation. We're going to work on facial expression. But before we do that, let's just play our animation to see where we're at.
Oh, I don't know. Will there be pie?
So we have a pretty good sync with the body and the head, but now we need to add some facial expression. Now the first thing we need to do is, just like we did before, we need to set our initial pose. Our initial pose is rather neutral. She has a neutral expression. So I'm going to just dial in something that's reasonably neutral, not so symmetrical though. Right now this is a very symmetrical pose, so let's go ahead and just kind of put her lids up a little bit, maybe so a little bit more relaxed. Maybe drop her eyebrows down, and again relax those. And one of the things we could do is just kind of maybe give her mouth a little bit of tilt and maybe even a slight smile. So if we start with a smile, then when we go to the frown, there's going to be a little bit more contrast, and that might add a little bit to this animation. So this looks like a pretty good initial pose. So I'm going to go ahead and key the mouth, the eyes, and the brows. And now let's go ahead and slide forward just a little bit. Now, as before, I want to hold this pose for just a fraction of a second at the beginning of the shot. So I'm going to go ahead and key all of these again just to lock them in. So now I've got a key here at the beginning and then about 3 frames in. And that just holds my pose. Now, if I want, I could play a little bit with my positioning. And again, it's just going to be very subtle though. And we're going to have a very broad motion next, so you probably won't even notice this. So I'm just going to keep it pretty simple. So the next one is the change of expression. She gets disappointed at this point, and she says,
Oh.
So when she says, oh, we want her expression to change. So I'm going to go down here to somewhere around frame, say about frame 16 or so, and I'm going to dial in a much sadder expression. So first thing I want to do is let's go ahead and bring her eyes in. We're going to narrow her eyes because she's not very happy. We're going to take the eyes, the pupils or the irises of the eyes, and we're going to move them down a little bit, make her look away. I think the lower lids are a little bit too high here, so let's go ahead and dial those in. And of course we need to change her emotion. Maybe even shift her mouth a little bit. And then also play with the eyebrows. So she's going to get kind of a worried brow maybe, something like that. And then let's go ahead and make sure we have keys for all of these. So now she's going. Now when we do this, you can see it's very, very subtle here.
Oh.
And we can actually add a little bit more. I want to add a blink to this, and that's to give it a little bit more punctuation. So I'm going to go halfway between this pose and this pose, which would be somewhere around frame 10. And let's just go ahead and dial in a blink. So I'm going to go ahead and close her upper and lower lids and key that. So now we have...
Oh.
Now one thing I'm also noticing is that the brows are changing pretty slowly. So I'm actually going to dial in the brows a little bit down and then make them come up a little bit. So right about here, where her blink is, I'm going to basically just key my brows so that way they come up a little bit faster and they come up with the eyes. So when those eyes open, the brows kind of go with them. So let's try that.
Oh.
And that looks pretty good. So now we're on to our next little bit of dialogue. And let's again try and imagine what her facial expression would be as she's shaking her head no. Now for me, a lot of people that I know will kind of close their eyes when they shake their head. In fact, typically when you do a head turn, your eyes blink in the middle of that head turn. So what's a head shake is nothing but a couple of head turns together. So I'm going to close her eyes, starting right about just before she speaks the line. I'm going to actually have a blink going into this little line here. So somewhere, say about 2 or 3 frames before here, I'm going to have about frame 28 here. And I'm going to go ahead and set a key for the eyes. And also I might play with the brows just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and key those as well. So now this basically just holds those lids in place. So now we're holding that pose.
Oh.
And now we can go into the blink. So I'm starting here frame 28 or so. I'm going to go about 6 frames in. I want this to be a fairly slow blink. So say 34. Let's close those. And then let's go ahead and just drop those brows just a little bit. And that'll give her a little bit more tension. Let's make sure we key those. So she's saying, I don't know. And we'll keep it closed throughout most of it and then open up. So again, I'm going to set a key for those brows. And let's key the eyes. And I'm not worrying so much about the mouth at this point because, again, she's going to be speaking dialogue. So I just want to get a general facial expression. So let's just see what this looks like.
Oh. I don't know.
Okay, so now she has to open her eyes. So again, fairly slow open. So let's go ahead and say frame 54. And again, just open her eyes a little bit. Again, she's fairly sad. And let's go ahead and leave those brows pretty much where they are. And so now at this point, she's going to have a change of mood. First, she's going to have a slight realization, and then she's going to say the next line. So here, as she lifts her head, her expression's going to change just a little bit. It's going to be a little bit more subtle. And then she'll say this next part of the line.
Will there be pie?
And so she needs to be very happy at that point. So one of the first things I want to do is let's just go ahead and set some keys here for the mouth to lock it into that because we're going to start changing her mouth expression as well. So I'm going to go forward just a little bit. So as she starts to lift that head, I want the expression to change. So right about here, I want her to have kind of a thought come through her head or a realization. So maybe her eyes open up. And you can see that as I do this, you can just almost feel how her expression is changing. So if we lift the eyebrows a little bit, you can see, oh my gosh, she's got some sort of idea here. And then if we lift the eyes a little bit, you can see that, again, it's really changing that expression. And let's go ahead and key these. And let's just go ahead and play this. So it goes, and so that's basically just the eyes, but let's also get the lower face into this. So let's go ahead and just take our emotion. And maybe drop her jaw. I don't want her to be too slack-jawed. That's kind of cliche. But maybe widen her mouth a little bit and give her a slight smile. Just a hair of a smile. And then move that mouth up just a little bit. So now we have a basic change in the mouth. So you can see that this subtle change in expression helps. So let's just play what we have.
Oh. I don't know.
And now we've got the fun part where she gets very happy. So this pose here, I kind of want to hold this just for a hair. So maybe about 4 frames here. So I want to make sure that I set keys for this. I'm going to set a key for the mouth and the brows. And I might even just open the eyes just a little bit more, just to give it a little bit more realization here, but just enough so that that pose holds just enough so the audience can read it. And typically the smallest amount that an audience can read is probably 2 to 3 frames. So I'm going to give this 4 frames just to make sure that they can read it. And so now here comes the fun part where she's going into a much different facial expression. So she goes, so her head comes up here. So I'm starting here at around 68. And so I want this to be, I want to put a blink in there to cover this. So I need at least 4 frames for this blink. So I'm going to blink down at the very start of this and add a blink. And then the brows are also, I want the brows to emphasize this because it's going to be a very big change in expression here. So I'm just going to drop the brows all the way down. And then open up the eyes, lift the brows, and open the eyes. And we want those eyes open pretty wide because she's happy now, or at least hopeful. And let's go ahead and give her kind of more of a happy expression here. Let's go ahead and pull those brows up. And let's make sure that we key those. And now let's also play with the mouth. Let's go ahead and make her happy. Let's give her maybe a little bit of teeth. And let's actually push her cheeks up a little bit. Just give her a little bit more of that. So now she's going from basically blinking into an expression change. So she blinks down, and then when she opens her eyes, there's a new expression. So now we've got...
Oh, I don't know. Will there be pie?
And that looks pretty good, actually.
Will there be pie?
So now at 76, we've created a very strong expression. We can pretty much keep that expression on the face for the rest of the animation. Now the next step is to start animating the dialogue. Now as we do this, the expression might change slightly, but at least we have a base from which to work. So before we go to the next lesson, let's just play what we have one more time.
Oh, I don't know. Will there be pie?
So that works pretty well. So let's go ahead, add some dialogue, add some mouth motion, and then we'll add one more layer. So now it's time to actually animate the dialogue or the lip sync of the character. Now before we did this, we actually animated a lot of the character. We animated the body, we animated some facial expression, and we have this.
Oh, I don't know. Will there be pie?
So this actually gives us a lot of acting without any lip sync. So this gives you a clue as to how important the body and the rest of the character is in addition to the mouth. You can animate the best lip sync in the world, but if the character is not acting it, the audience won't believe it. So now that we've got some of the acting done, let's go ahead and do some dialogue. So first thing I want to do is just start reading the track and just start working my way through. So I just typically just scrub the animation, figure out what it needs to be done in terms of mouth shapes, and just kind of move forward from there. So the first mouth shape is here. It starts off with O. So it starts right around here, around frame 4, around frame 6. I'm going to have her give an O kind of mouth shape. I'm going to go ahead and go, make sure we set a key for that. We're going. But we go a little bit more into an ooh before we actually close it down. So I'm actually going to go here to make this more of an ooh shape. And I may have to dial out the emotion slider here. Let's just go ahead and make sure we have a key here. And we'll make sure that her mouth is closed here. Let's go ahead and just go and just give a slight key here. So again, her mouth is moving just a little bit, so it's...
Oh.
So the next one is I don't know. So let's see how that feels. So basically it's I right here. So it's I don't know. And this last part here is kind of the O. So let's go ahead and keep her mouth closed here at 30. So I'm going to set a framing key here, something to just kind of give her a basic pose here. And then just go to I. So I is going to be like that. And again, sometimes if I have really extreme emotions on there, it won't read as lip sync. So sometimes I have to dial back the emotion in order for the lip sync to read. So let's make sure we have a key for that. So I don't know. So let's go ahead and go into a closed mouth and give her kind of a consonant shape. So I, let's go ahead and set a key for that at 36. So again, she's opening her mouth just a little bit. She's saying don't. So I can just drop her mouth a little bit. Make sure we have a key. And then close it back up. Make sure we have a key. I done, and then it goes into an O. So let's go ahead and dial in an O shape. And dial out those lips. Probably don't need emotion. That tends to conflict with the O shape. So make sure we have a key. And that looks pretty good. So let's see what we have.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, that's pretty good. It's workable. We could probably tweak it a little bit more, but for the sake of time, let's just go ahead and leave it at that. Now this next part is where she has a little bit of a change of expression. And that's great. And now we have the rest of our line, which is...
Will there be pie?
So we're going to start off with a W sound. So here, just before this starts, I'm going to basically just key that so that I have a mouth key right here. And now we need to go into W. So will. So will, it's going to start with the pursed lip here. So let's go ahead and dial in something that's reasonably close. So now we have, okay, so will. So I'm going to go into kind of more of a consonant sound here. Something like that, but happy. So now we've got, well, there. Okay, this is actually going to be wide open. And I want to take those out here. And let's make sure we have a key for that. Okay, now we're going into a B. So again, this emotion, you kind of have to make sure that you're not overdoing the emotion because sometimes that can mess with the lip sync. So let's go ahead and see what we've got. B. Okay, that's pretty easy. And then another closed mouth here. Because we're going to say the word pie. This is the letter P. There. B. And then this is pie. So pie. So let's go ahead and open up the mouth. And then it ends kind of in an E sound. Pie. So again, open up that mouth. And it ends in kind of an E. So kind of a smile. And we can shift the mouth up just a bit. There we go. So let's go ahead and make sure we have a key for that. And that's pretty good. Now I can tweak this just a little bit. And again, just how do you want this to work? So again, this is just basic first pass of dialogue. And let's just see what we have here.
Oh, I don't know. Will there be pie? Oh, I don't know. Will there be pie?
So that's pretty good for a first pass. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and tweak it a little bit more, and we'll come back and finesse this just a bit more. At this point, we have the basic acting and dialogue in place. Now this really As you've seen, animating characters' dialogue goes way beyond just moving the mouth, and expression of a character is also way beyond just what's happening on the face. Body posture, emotion, timing, all of that plays into the audience's perception of the character. So let's go ahead and take a broader view here, and let's just go ahead and do a full body shot with dialogue. Now I have a dialogue line already set up for this character, and let's just go ahead and listen to it.
I didn't know that thing would explode.
So as you can see, this has a very definite rhythm, and it has an emotional build in it. So let's listen to it one more time.
I didn't know that thing would explode.
So as you can see, we've got a very definite beat to this. We have basically three main beats before the line is delivered, and this is where he's stuttering. So we have this one here, which is I didn't, and then you can almost see it's almost identical here. I didn't know that thing would explode. Okay, so we have a number of key points in this dialogue. We have the stuttering at the beginning, and then we have him saying, I didn't know that thing would explode. Now, when you get a line of dialogue like this, you need to kind of take time to absorb it. Listen to it a couple of times, stand up, act it out. And if you want, you can start to thumbnail the poses that you want your character to be in. Now, I did a very rough thumbnail. I'm not the best artist, but these are some of my thumbnails for this scene. So as you can see, we're just going to start with a neutral pose here. And then right here, he's going to start saying I, and he's going to start gesturing with his hands. We're going to do a lot of gesturing. So his hands here are going to gesture, and then they're going to move up and gesture again, I, and then he's going to, when he starts to say I didn't, he starts to get more emotion into it, so you can see that his body posture is going to be stronger. And then we're going to basically almost bend him over when he says I didn't know, and then he straightens up and says that thing and gestures towards that thing, and then he does a quick antic here, and again he kind of goes down, and then he goes really broad when he says explode. So those are some of the basic poses that I'm planning to do for this animation. So when we do this, we just need to start blocking out the poses at the proper point. So I want you to go ahead and take the line and figure out how you want to animate it and block out some poses. Do some thumbnail sketches, and then we'll come back and actually start to animate the shot. At this point, you've taken the time to listen to the dialogue track a few times. You've kind of absorbed the intent of the character, and you've got a sense for how you want your character to act. Now you could have thumbnailed this out or just had a sense in your head as to what's working. So I've gone ahead and thumbnailed this out a little bit, and so what I want my character to do is to just lift his arms as he stutters, and then go down into a big anticipation, and then come up when he says the word explode, and kind of animate that a little bit more broadly. So, with that in mind, let's go ahead and do a couple of poses just to show you some of the process. So the first thing I want to do is just get my initial pose. What is my character doing when the camera hits him? So let's just go ahead and get a basic relaxed pose here. So I'm just going to maybe turn his foot out. We're going to put the weight here on the left foot. So I'm going to move his hips back a little bit, maybe slightly bent. I'm going to maybe angle his hips this way and then grab his spine and angle it the other way. Give him just a little bit of a curve. And then maybe kind of twist his body just a little bit. And again, we're just getting a nice general pose here. And again, the pose that you want just kind of depends on where the character is at when the scene first starts. So I'm going to go ahead and bend his wrist a little bit. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and turn this arm out. And maybe flip this hand over just a little bit so he's showing the palm. So something like that. And again, this is kind of arbitrary. Some of this would depend on the context of the scene, what happened in the scene before. But something like this will work just fine. Now once we have that, we can make sure that we set a key for the body. Now the next pose is going to be kind of more of a stronger pose. So I'm actually going to have him start this right around that first stutter. So where he goes I. And you can see that here, right here on the timeline here. It's about right where he says I, somewhere around, I have it at frame 6 here. And we're doing this at 24 frames per second. So what I want him to do is I want him to start bending his knees at every beat of I didn't. And then his hands are getting higher and higher. So his body will get lower, his hands will get higher. So let's go ahead and just bend his knees just a little bit. And then bend him over just a little bit. And again, this is just rough. Something like this. And then I want his hands to be gesturing. So he's kind of gesturing with his hands. He's almost talking with his hands. And so this is a really good example of how body motion affects dialogue. And then with this arm, I think we want to kind of turn this out, and he's actually going to be gesturing with both hands. So I just want to get a pretty good pose on this. Maybe bend this elbow just a bit, give him a little bit of fluidity, and again, just turn the hand over. And he's going to be going. And it feels like he's a little bit, feels like his weight is a little bit too far to his left, so I'm going to kind of bend the spine just to center him just a little bit, and maybe even push his hips over just a bit. Now what I'm trying to do is just get him solid on the ground, so just get a good distribution of weight here. So I think some of this is going to be in the hips. So something like that. So again, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that we key this. So what we have here is he's just going, he's going I, and then we're going to go to the next pose. But one of the things I want to do is just make sure that I've locked in this pose. Now I can do this one of two ways. I can set what are called blocking poses. In other words, I can block out my moving hold, or I can go into my curve editor and I can set my poses as stepped, which would just step from one major pose to the other. I like putting in blocking poses because it gives me more freedom with timing. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I've got everything selected, and I just want to make sure that I get a key for that. And I've got this right before he goes into this next little piece of dialogue. So basically what we're doing here is we're creating a hold here, and then we'll create another key here for this next piece of dialogue. So let's go ahead to that next pose. I'm going to go right to just about the beginning of that line, and then I'm going to create another pose, but this time I want to actually just amplify that pose. So I'm going to push him down a little bit more, and then I'm going to lift up the arms, bend the elbows a little bit more, and bend those wrists out. So again, I'm just raising his hands as I lower the body. So that's just going to start to amplify that pose. And so every time he says I, it gets more and more intense in the dialogue, as well as in his body posture. And he's kind of confused as to what happened. So again, he's going to probably start to look away from the camera. Something like this. And again, make sure that we have a key for that, or keys for that. I'm just using one key just to represent the entire body, but obviously you would have many keys in your 3D package. So what he's doing now is he's going, so every time he says I, he goes up a little bit more. So let's just do one more of these. So again, I'm going to set a blocking pose here. So I'm going to make sure that I have all of these keyed. And then one more here. Right about here maybe. And again, he's going to go a little bit further down, and I want to kind of rotate his hips back, and I want to bend him over at the spine, because this time he's kind of almost pleading. So he's kind of doing this, where he's kind of almost pleading to whoever he's talking to forgive him, or to understand that he didn't know that thing would explode. Right? Now, one of the things I notice is that when you start to animate a line of dialogue, you listen to it so many times that it becomes almost a part of your vocabulary. You'll start to hear it in your dreams at night and that sort of thing. I remember once where I animated a song, and it took me 4 months to animate the thing, and I was dreaming it by the end of those 4 months. Anyway, so let's go ahead and see what we have here. So we've got... Okay, so as you can see, I'm just working my way through this dialogue. I have a kind of a rough roadmap in my thumbnails as to where I want to go with my character. And I'm just blocking these in. I'm going for the main pose, and then I'm adding in a hold for those places where we need a moving hold. And I'm just going to work my way through this. So you understand the process, so go ahead and work through the line yourself, and I'm going to do the same, and we'll come back and we'll show the basic poses. I've gone ahead and blocked out my main poses. I've also added in holds for those poses where I thought a hold was needed. So let's just go ahead and play the animation that we have so far.
I didn't know that thing would explode.
So as you can see, it's a little jerky. It's still a little mechanical, but the poses are there. So let's just step through the poses just to see what we have. So the ones that we did were these ones here. So where he says I, and then we have another pose here for I, and then that goes into a moving hold here. There he says I didn't at this point, and again I have another moving hold right here. And then we move into some new poses where he's going I didn't. He's almost crazy. He's holding his head. And now at this point he kind of breaks that and he says no. And then he says that thing, gestures towards it, and then we have the big broad motion at the end. We have a big anticipation, would explode. So, again, some broad motion at the end. But as you can see, the poses are in and they pretty much work for the scene. So let's go ahead and play this one more time just to see.
I didn't know that thing would explode.
So let's go ahead and start loosening up this animation. We're going to start by adding some moving holds, and then we'll move on to things such as secondary motion. So let's just, again, just work on the beginning of this. Let's just go ahead and do some moving holds. So I'm going to scrub through this. So as you can see, this is actually pretty good. One of the things we can do is we can start to make this a moving hold. So we need to change either this pose or this pose. I'm actually going to change the initial pose here, and I'm going to bring the hand up just a little bit more here, and then bring the wrist up as well. So what I'm going to do is basically anticipate this a little bit more. So now we've got, so that works pretty well. Now we can also add some to the body. So we can actually bring the body up just a little bit. So now we're giving us some more motion. Even just that little bit of change adds a little bit more life to the scene. And we can also add in the head. Now he's going to be saying a pretty big vowel here, so actually I'm going to tilt his head up just a little bit. So now his head's going to move as well. Maybe drop it down just a little bit here. Now I'm just playing, just affecting the keys that we have here. Now if I want, I can add some in-betweens as well and start making this a little bit more fluid. But let's just see how this works with just these keys. So now let's go ahead and do a little bit more. So we're going from this key here. So again, maybe anticipate this. So let's bring the wrists up just a little bit. And again here, I want to bring the body up just a little bit. And maybe we can play with the wrist just a little bit more. Break them just a bit more. And again, work with the head. What I'm doing is I'm just adding subtle motion to this body, just so that it starts to come to life. And again, this is just with the keys that we have. Okay, so I could probably make his body move up just a little bit more, give him a little bit more action in the body here. So now we've got, there we go. And again, we can probably do the same thing that we're doing. So I'm basically kind of just repeating my pattern here, which is basically I'm breaking the wrists this way at the beginning so that they flip. So now we can maybe even pull the shoulders up a little bit. Now one of the things I'm noticing here is that this here is very straight. So we want to get a nice silhouette here. So I'm going to go ahead and just work with that hand to get a little bit more of a break to the wrist. Now I'm not animating the fingers just yet. We can do those as another pass. So just having that a little bit more of a silhouette there makes it work a little bit better. In fact, we could probably push this hand out just a little bit. We can now go to this end pose and tweak it a little bit considering what has gone on before. And again, I'm just going through these moving holds that we have and turning them into moving holds. So now we've got, so now I've got the arms. So let's go ahead and just play with the hips a little bit. Bring the hips up. Move the head just a little bit here. So as you can see, all we're doing here is just adding a little bit of variation to the holds that we already have in place. So by doing this, you can very easily add some life to your characters. Now we can go in between these and add some more keys and give it some more secondary motion, which we'll do next. I've gone ahead and finished up my pass on moving holds, and so now I have the animation a little bit more fluid. So let's just play what we have.
I didn't know that thing would explode. I didn't know that thing would explode.
So as you can see, it's a little bit more fluid, but not completely fluid. So we need to add another layer. And in this layer, we're going to work a little bit on secondary motion. So that's overlap, follow through, drag, and so on. Now, a really good place to observe secondary motion is in the arms and the hands. So let's go ahead and play with those to get this animation a little bit more smooth. So one of the first things I'm noticing is just at the very beginning here. So let's take a look at this right arm here. And as it moves up, that wrist is very solid. So we have a very stiff wrist here. And basically, it's just going through those two poses. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of drag into this right wrist by just rotating it back slightly. So I'm just changing that initial pose. And then a few frames into it, I'm going to have it overlap. So I'm just going to have it kind of come up like this, because really this is being pulled, so it's going to act like a pendulum. and it's going to get into its maximum position after the elbow. And I'm going to set a key for that. So now we've got, and you can see that adding just that little bit makes it look more fluid. So we can do the same for this hand here. So I'm going to go over to frame 6 here. Let's just go ahead and repose that. And again, I'm just going to push it back just a little bit. And then a few frames in, I'm going to make it follow through. So now we've got, and that's a lot more fluid. So let's do this one more time here. So again, you can see how the hands are moving quite a bit here between 14 and 18. So I'm going to drag those wrists back just a little bit, break them. Now breaking of the wrist is a very important animation concept. And then a few frames in, I'm going to overlap those. And again, try and get a good pose on these. Now I'm not animating the fingers yet. I just want to get the hand motion first before I really finalize the fingers. So you're not going to see that. So this won't be the absolute final pose of this hand. So as you can see, it's starting to be a little bit more fluid. I'm going to do this one more time here. We can, again, go to the beginning of this pose here. Drag those wrists back just a little bit. Break the wrists. And then pull them over into this pose. So now we've got, and again, that just gives it a little bit more fluidity. Now when we go to here where he's doing this broad motion, where he says, there's a lot of arm motion, particularly on the right arm. So I'm going to focus on the right arm here. And as it comes down into this pose here, you'll see that right there, that pose is just awkward. So if we take a look at this from a silhouetting kind of standpoint, you'll see that we've got this kind of arm coming here, and then we've got this big kind of walk right there. It's not a smooth curve. We can change this very easily just by doing a quick rotate of the wrist. So if I rotate that wrist a little bit and just smooth it up, what happens here is that now we have a very smooth line that goes from the tip of the fingers all the way up. And this makes it a much more pleasing pose, and it also gives us the opportunity to add the drag that we want to put into that hand. So I can actually pull that hand back and even go all the way into the fingers and get a very nice curve. And this gives us that kind of curve like the flowing blade of grass that you see in all the animation books. And it gives us a very nice, smooth motion. So now we've got, that. And we can also just in between these one at a time if we need to. So I'm going to go ahead and again position that hand right there. And then as he comes into that, I'm going to, again, so right there, that's pretty nice. And then he basically immediately moves that hand out. So that hand is actually still moving down while the shoulder is trying to push it out. So we're going to have another bit of drag here. So as this comes in, I'm going to put this right around, say, frame 52. I'm going to drag this hand and add a key here. So now, and just by adding a little bit of drag to that hand, it gives it a much more natural flow. And right here, again, we can drop the hand and we can, again, just do.
I didn't know that thing.
So that gives it a much smoother motion for the arm. Now this is a process that you're going to have to do for basically every part of the body. So I'm just right now focusing mostly on the right arm, but you'll have to go through and do this for not just the arms, but also the head, and if the leg or any other body part is moving, you'll have to do that for those as well. So go ahead and do a secondary motion pass on your character, and then we'll come back and start working on facial animation. I've gone ahead and finished off the secondary motion on both arms as well as the head. and I've added in the finger animation. So let's just see where we're at with the scene.
I, I, I didn't know that thing would explode. I didn't know that thing would explode.
So you can see that the animation is pretty much in place. And also that just by moving the body, we get pretty good sync. Now this is because the body is actually a big portion of the visual part of this scene. So if we were to kind of divide this up by area, you would see that the body itself is probably 80% of the area. And the head is probably only 20%. So the audience is going to see more of this than they are of this. Now this doesn't mean that the head is inconsequential. It's just that you need to make sure that the body is in sync as well as the face. So now let's go ahead and move on to animating the face. So we're going to start off by animating the lip sync, and then we'll finish off by doing facial expression. Now before we do anything, we do need to get an initial facial pose. So I'm actually going to zoom into my scene here, and let's go ahead and get an initial facial pose here. Now remember, what happened in the moment before this scene? Well, he witnessed an explosion. So his facial expression and the direction of his gaze have to reflect that. So I'm going to start off with his eyes, and let's go ahead and put his eyes slightly off screen. Maybe kind of give him a little bit of squint. Maybe he's a little bit worried. And then his mouth is probably not going to be happy. So I'm going to dial in kind of a gulp sort of expression, and just something a little less than happy. And let's go ahead and make sure we set a key for the mouth, the eyes, and the brows. So now let's start scrubbing through the scene and start plugging in some of the initial lip sync. So this first line here is very simple. It's just the word I. So I need to have a blocking pose before that so that we can open our mouth. So I'm going to go ahead and just set a key for the mouth right there, just to hold that pose. And then here, where the lip sync starts, I'm going to go ahead and open that mouth. Pretty simple. Key that. I. And so it ends kind of more on an E sort of sound. So I'm going to go ahead and play with the lips. And now I'm also want to make sure that I keep his expression in place. So again, I'm focusing on the lower face right now, but I want to make sure that his mouth is displaying the emotion of that scene. So now it's, okay, there we go. And now we're coming into our second little bit of dialogue. And again, it's the exact same word, so it's almost going to be the same sort of animation. So I want to have a blocking pose here. So I'm going to, again, create a key that holds my mouth in place. So let's scrub this. And then open up the mouth again, because this is where it's opening. And we have to rotate my camera a bit to see this. I, 22. Make sure we have a key there. It looks like right around 27 is where this particular line starts. So again, blocking pose. Make sure we key that. And again, I want to move the mouth just a little bit while he's in that pose, just to give it some life. So and I'm moving my camera. Now this isn't my final camera pose. I'm just trying to get the lip sync in place here. So again, he's doing I. But this time he's doing I didn't. So right here, we're going to close it again. So we have another little bounce there in the mouth. Again, we're going to key that. And then close that up again. So now I have basically the first part of the dialogue animated.
I didn't know that.
And now we've got the rest of it to do. So the process is pretty much the same. You just read the track, and position the mouse accordingly. So I'm going to let you finish that up, and I'm going to go ahead and finish this up myself, and then we'll come back and do some more. I've gone ahead and finished up the mouth, and I basically just matched the phonemes to the dialogue, and I also respected the character's energy and emotion. So let's go ahead and play what I have.
I didn't know that thing would explode. I didn't know that thing would explode.
So as you can see, this is getting very close to finished. All we need to do is just get the upper part of the face, and we should be done. But before I do that, let's just go ahead and take a quick look at just the lip sync so you get an idea as to what I did. So this is a camera that is locked to the character's face, and we don't have the timeline up on this one, but let's just see what it looks like in sync.
I didn't know that thing would explode. I didn't know that thing would explode.
So as you can see, I've matched the mouth shapes to the dialogue track and also tried to maintain the character's emotions. So let's go back to our timeline here, and let's animate the upper part of the face. So the first thing I want to do is just get a sense for what I want to do with the eyes. So at the beginning, he's kind of in shock, so actually I kind of want to keep the eyes open. So through these first two lines, I just want to keep the eyes pretty much open. And then when he does this, I kind of want to change the eyes and change the intention. So let's go through this a little bit here, and I'm going to actually zoom in on his face here. And let's just get some eye motion going here. So again, I just want to make sure that the eyes are kind of pointed in the same direction here. So I'm going to make sure that I have a keyframe here, and then he does a big head move here. So right about here, I'm going to again just key the eyes and make sure that the eyes are pointed in the right direction. In fact, I probably should use this camera here and just make sure that his eyes really aren't going too over the map. They need to be pointed the same direction. So, okay, so now when he does this, I want to change the eye direction. So first thing I want to do is add in a blink. Let's go ahead and go a little bit closer so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to start here on the lids, and I'm going to set a key, and also set a key for the eyes to make sure that we have the eye direction locked down. And then as he comes into this pose, I want the lids to drop. So I actually want him to close his eyes. Sure, we key that. And then when he opens them, we want a different eye pose. So I want his eyes to be a little bit more narrow, and then I also want these eyes to be looking up a little bit more. So maybe something like that. And again, I need to take a look at it from the actual camera view here. So I know I'm kind of doing this right here, but let's just go ahead and see what we've got. There we go. So as you can see, he's now kind of more pleading to the audience or to whoever it is. And so now he's moving down again, and again, I want to make sure that the eyes stay in the right place. So I want to make sure that the eyes aren't just fixed to the skull, that they're actually looking at something. So right there, I want to kind of just keep them posed here. So now we've got, and now again, he's going down for a big move, so I'm going to start a blink. So I want to make sure I have a keyframe for the lids. And then, as you can see, you don't even see the face at this point, but I still want to have a blink. So I'm going to just make sure that I have this blink here, and let's make sure we key it. And then he should be moving up.
No.
When he says no, that's where I want to open up the eyes again. So I'm going to take my blink, open those up. In fact, I should probably zoom in here so I can see what I'm doing. And we can even do kind of an eye roll here at this point. So he's going to probably go,
I didn't know that.
and we could probably roll the eyes this way. And so by setting a separate key here, we've got,
No, that.
So he has to be looking at whatever that thing is. So I want to make sure my eye direction is good. So something like that. Make sure we key that. So now we've got...
I didn't know that thing would...
Okay, so now let's go ahead and play what we have.
I didn't know that thing would...
Okay, so I'm noticing that when he turns his eyes before he turns his head, I think that's a little too much. So let's take a look at this one more time.
I didn't know that thing would explode.
So where I did the eye roll, I don't think that is actually working in this context. So let's go ahead and go to that pose and just go ahead and make the eyes a little bit over more towards the side there. So it goes, I didn't know. There we go. And now he's going to go again into a big anticipation. So again, we want to blink the eyes here. So as he starts this, I want to go ahead and set a key for the eyes. And then close them. Make sure we set a key. And then open those up. And now this time, this is a big motion here. So I want to have a very big eye motion here. So let's go ahead and see how this works. And then we need to settle those eyes down just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and grab those lids and put them into a more natural state right about there. So now I've got some pretty good motion with the eyes. Let's just see what we have.
I didn't know that thing would explode.
So now that we have these, we can move on to the eyebrows and we can finish the scene. Now we've got the eyes moving as well as the mouth, and all we have to do is finish off with the brows to finish off the facial expression. So let's go ahead and just play what we have.
I didn't know that thing would explode.
And so that works pretty well. So let's go ahead and just get some animation on the brows. Now again, I'm going to kind of jump in here so I can see this a little bit better. So again, I'm just going to start with my initial pose here, which is here. And we can basically just amplify this a little bit as he gets more and more intense. So what I can do is basically just take my brows, lift them a little bit up in the corners, set a key for those, and then set a blocking key right here. And then right here we can go up again with the brows just a little bit. And again, we're just trying to get him a little bit more furrowed. So again, I'm just going to set a key here. So now he's got... And now when he closes his eyes, that looks very unnatural. So I want to have the brows go down with the eyes. So I'm going to set again an initial key or blocking key right here. And then as he goes down into this, I want the brows to kind of drop with the eyes. So I'm just going to have the brows go down right there. So now he goes... And then when he comes back up here, we need to go back to kind of more of a worried brow here. So again, something like that. And again, I'm just going through here and I'm just setting key poses here. Now I can go ahead and tweak this a little bit later, but I just want to kind of get a rough view here. So here's what I've got now. Right here, I need to bring these up a little bit because I think these are animating down too much here. So now I want... And again, when he closes his eyes, I want the brows to go down. So let's go down here to where he's got this closed. Make sure we have a key for that. And so when he says no, let's see what the initial pose is. So let's go ahead and make sure that the brows work for that. So I don't want these brows to be angry, but I don't want them to be worried either. So I'm just going to bring them up here in the middle and make sure we have a key for that. And again, I think I just want to keep the brows pretty much the same through this. And then when he says explode, I want the brows to go down with the blink. So again, bring those brows down. Let's make sure you can see those. Let's bring those brows all the way down because it's a very intense anticipation right there. And then when he says explode, well, we want the brows to be way up. So let's go ahead and make sure that we have those. And then we'll settle those down just a little bit, right about there. Okay, so let's go back to our standard camera here and see what we've got.
I didn't know that thing would explode. I didn't know that thing would explode.
So that's a pretty good first pass. Now, all of these that I've been doing have been first passes. We can certainly go over this animation once or twice more to really finesse it. But by now, you should have the process understood. So when you're animating dialogue, particularly with a full body shot, you need to get the body syncing to the dialogue and then worry about the mouth, the eyes, and the brows. And make sure that you get a facial expression that matches the dialogue that you're animating to. So hopefully this will help you with whatever dialogue that you animate.